Why is it that the people who work the hardest are often the ones who get noticed the least? You pour your soul into every task, yet your dedication seems to vanish into the background noise. It is a jarring feeling to realize you are indispensable, but also completely ignored by everyone around. Is it possible to be so reliable that you actually become invisible to those who need you? We are taught that hard work is the only key to success, but that is simply not true. True success requires you to work with wisdom and carefully manage how your presence is perceived by others. To understand this balance, we must explore a curious phenomenon known as the invisible lamp metaphor. Think about a simple lamp that stays lit in the corner of a room all day and night. Because the light is always there, people eventually stop seeing it and take its glow for granted. It becomes a silent part of the environment, performing its duty without ever receiving a second thought. But notice what happens the very moment that reliable little lamp suddenly flickers and goes dark. Suddenly, everyone in the room stops what they are doing to look at the source of the darkness. This shift in attention reveals a powerful lesson about reliability and how others perceive our constant efforts. If you are always on and always available, you risk becoming just another fixture in the office. Working with wisdom means knowing when to shine and when to let the room go slightly dim. It is about finding the perfect balance between being a dependable worker and a recognized individual. Have you ever noticed that you only truly think about a lamp when it finally stops working? This paradox explains why your tireless dedication might actually be making you less visible to your peers. You must learn to step out of the shadows and ensure your contributions are both seen and felt. Success is not just about the hours you put in, but the impact you make when you do. Managing your presence is a skill that separates the mere laborers from the true masters of their craft. To truly master this art, we must look beyond the surface of our daily routines and habits. But to understand why your dedication might be making you invisible, we need to visit a unique place. Let us step inside a factory and meet a master of a forgotten craft who knows these secrets. His story will change the way you think about your career and the value of your hard work. Years ago, a young man entered a factory with one goal: to become truly irreplaceable. Inside the metal walls, he sought the guidance of a master who knew every machine's heart. This mentor was an elderly craftsman, a man whose hands held decades of quiet, expert wisdom. The student arrived eager, but he soon realized that true mastery requires more than just speed. What does it really take to be the absolute best at what you do every day? The old man taught him that the first step to greatness is working with absolute focus. He watched as the craftsman sharpened a blade in total silence, focused only on the edge. Silence was key, as the mentor insisted that talking too much only drains your creative energy. You must learn to work with wisdom, letting your results speak louder than your own voice. The craftsman challenged him to master every single task until no one else could possibly replace him. This wasn't just about labor. It was about achieving a level of indispensability that commands respect. In this mentor-student dynamic, the young man learned that reliability is built in the quiet moments. Day by day, he honed his skills, practicing until his movements became as fluid as water. He had to find the perfect balance between being a reliable worker and an exceptional artist. Can silence actually be a tool for mastery in a world that never stops making noise? The young worker absorbed every lesson, transforming from a novice into a disciplined force of nature. He learned to block out the factory's roar, finding a sanctuary within his own deep concentration. Every bolt he tightened and every part he forged reflected the precision of a true expert. The best workers, the old man whispered, are the ones who make the impossible look easy. His goal was clear: to become the most skilled person the factory had ever seen. He realized that being indispensable meant being the one person who could solve any sudden problem. The young man listened, he learned, and he mastered the silence of a true craftsman. Time passed, as it always does, and soon the eager student became the factory's new master. After exactly 10 years of shared labor, the elderly craftsman finally decided it was time to retire. The young man stepped forward to take his mentor's place, inheriting the heavy responsibility of the shop. Following the path carved by his teacher, he poured his entire soul into every single delicate task. 10 long years followed, representing 3,650 days of absolute, unwavering perfection. He became like a clock that never misses a second, ticking away so steadily we forget it exists. Every sunrise found him at his workbench, driven by a dedication that few could ever truly understand. Like the invisible lamp from our paradox, his brilliance was constant yet strangely overlooked by the world. He worked with wisdom and extreme effort, ensuring that every machine under his care ran perfectly. But does such loyalty always pay off in a world that values speed over true craftsmanship? Day after day, he refined his skills until his movements became a silent dance of pure efficiency. His reliability became the foundation of the factory, a silent strength that kept the entire operation moving. He believed that by becoming indispensable, he was securing a future that could never be taken away. The ghost of his mentor's teachings guided his hands through every complex repair and difficult challenge. Seasons changed and years blurred together as he remained a fixed point in an ever-shifting industrial landscape. His dedication never wavered once, even when the work grew harder and the hours grew much longer. What happens when you give everything to a place that only sees you as a cold gear? He struggled to find a balance between his personal life and the heavy demands of his profession. Choosing to work with wisdom, he mastered the subtle art of solving problems before they even started. For a full decade, he remained the most hardworking and loyal employee the factory had ever seen. He was the master of silence now, a true craftsman who let his impeccable results speak for him. But a decade of pure dedication was about to collide with a very cold and hard reality. Have you ever wondered if your hard work is actually being noticed by those who matter most? Remembering the old man's warning, he wondered if his light was finally starting to fade away. The rhythm of the machines was his only company as the years of labor began to take hold. Dedication is a powerful virtue, but it can also act as a blindfold to the world. For years, the young man believed that his hard work would eventually speak for itself. He had mastered every machine, becoming fully competent in every technical process within the factory. No other worker on the entire factory floor could match the level of skill he possessed. Every day he arrived early and worked with absolute focus, maintaining a quiet and professional demeanor. He never complained or sought attention, trusting that his results were enough to get noticed. But as the years passed, a cold and bitter reality began to set in for him. While he remained in the same position, the world around him seemed to be moving forward. Have you ever watched someone far less qualified than you take the seat you clearly earned? It was a painful sight to see peers with less than half his skills receive promotions. These less experienced workers climbed the ladder while he remained stuck at the very bottom. He was the most skilled person there, yet he was the only one standing completely still. Why does competence sometimes feel like a curse when you are the most reliable person available? Despite his immense growth in talent, his salary stayed exactly where it was when he started. He was still being paid the same low rate he received as a beginning factory assistant. Every month, the financial burden grew heavier as his peers enjoyed raises he had earned. He felt like the foundation of a great building essential to the structure, but buried and unseen. His reliability had made him invisible, a tool that was too useful to ever be moved. The frustration began to boil over as he realized his silent dedication was being completely ignored. He had done everything right, yet the rewards he was promised never actually materialized. How could the factory operate without him, yet refuse to recognize the value he provided daily? The internal conflict became too much to bear, leaving him feeling deeply broken and confused. He realized that his path to indispensability required him to learn how to work with wisdom. Needing clarity, he decided to visit the old teacher who had first guided his career journey. He carried his heavy heart back to the master, seeking an explanation for his stagnant life. The young man needed to know why his mastery had led to such a profound disappointment. Confused and broken, he went back to the only person who might truly have the answer. Returning to the master's quiet garden, the young man carried a heart heavy with unspoken resentment and confusion. He looked at the old teacher, desperate to understand why his relentless hard work yielded no reward. "Master," he began, his voice trembling with the weight of a decade spent in the factory shadows. "I have mastered every machine and memorized every process until no one can match my technical skill." He stood tall, claiming that his competence surpassed every other worker within those cold metallic factory walls. He had worked tirelessly to make himself fully competent in every single aspect of the factory operation. Yet, despite this absolute mastery, he watched as others climbed the ladder he was firmly denied. People with less than half of his experience were stepping into the very roles he rightfully earned. This bitter reality felt like a cruel betrayal of everything he believed about the value of dedication. He asked why his reliability had become a prison rather than a path to his future success. The master listened in silence, his eyes reflecting the flickering glow of a nearby oil lamp. "You have become the perfect tool," the master whispered, "but you have forgotten how to be seen." In his quest for indispensability, the young man had accidentally made himself too valuable to ever move. To the management, losing him in his current role meant risking the stability of the entire operation. They feared that promoting him would leave a void that no ordinary worker could ever hope to fill. This is the tragic trap where extreme competence leads directly to a ceiling of professional stagnation. When you become the pillar holding up the roof, no one wants to see you move elsewhere. Your very excellence becomes the chain that keeps you anchored to a position you have long outgrown. You are no longer a candidate for growth, but a permanent fixture required for daily survival. The young man realized his talent was being used to subsidize the progress of those beneath him. He had worked with effort, but he had failed to work with the necessary wisdom of visibility. It was a painful lesson in the delicate balance between being reliable and being truly indispensable. The lamp metaphor began to take shape in his mind as he looked at the glowing flame. A lamp that burns perfectly in the corner is often forgotten until the moment the oil runs dry. Now he had to learn how to break the cycle of being the factory's invisible, essential engine. The old craftsman looked at his student and proposed a dangerous experiment that defied all logic. His mentor gave him a piece of advice that sounded like career suicide. "Stop working tomorrow. Take a day off," the master suggested, "and provide any excuse you need to justify it." What is the power of a single day of absence in a place that relies on you? Is your presence truly felt, or is it just your hard work that is being consumed? The young man hesitated, wondering if this gamble would prove his worth or lead to ruin. Despite his fear, he decided to trust the wisdom of the man who taught him everything. He applied for leave immediately after speaking with his mentor, his heart racing with nervous anticipation. The request was granted without question, leaving the factory floor to function without its master engine. Like pulling a single thread that holds a tapestry together, the experiment had officially begun. As the sun rose the next day, the young man remained far away from the machines. Back at the factory, the familiar rhythm of production started to stutter and lose its pace. Without his watchful eye, the complex systems he maintained began to show signs of sudden strain. Tasks usually handled by the young man could not be solved properly by anyone else there. Workers scrambled to fix issues that were once invisible thanks to his constant, silent dedication. The factory faced many problems because the young man was absent for just one single day. Supervisors searched for answers in manuals, but the intuitive knowledge he possessed was nowhere to be found. A growing sense of panic filled the air as production lines ground to an unexpected halt. The invisible lamp had been extinguished, and now the darkness was becoming impossible to ignore. Every small problem snowballed into a major crisis that threatened the entire day's output. Management finally realized how much they relied on the person they had so recently overlooked. It was a harsh lesson in the difference between being reliable and being truly indispensable. The silence of his workstation spoke louder than years of his tireless, unrecognized labor ever could. His absence had created a vacuum that no other worker in the facility could hope to fill. By midday, the cost of his missing expertise was mounting with every passing unproductive hour. The mentor's plan was working, revealing the hidden value of a man once taken for granted. Wisdom is knowing when to work hard and when to let your absence speak for itself. The young man waited in the quiet, finally understanding the weight of his own silent contribution. Within 24 hours, the silence of the factory was replaced by the sound of things falling apart. The experiment worked better than he ever imagined as chaos gripped the entire factory floor. Suddenly, the man who was invisible became the only person the manager wanted to see. As machines ground to a halt, the manager realized his once quiet worker was actually essential. The silence of a missing expert spoke much louder than years of his silent, humble labor. Why did it take his total absence for them to finally see his true, undeniable value? Like a lamp metaphor, a light only reveals its worth when the room goes completely dark. Is it sad that we only value things once they are gone from our daily lives? The manager felt the heavy weight of stalled production lines and mounting financial losses today. He realized that some people are like the air we breathe unnoticed until they are gone. When the young man returned, the manager immediately promoted him to the senior technician role. This new title finally matched the high level of responsibility he had carried for many years. It was the long-overlooked salary and recognition he had earned through a decade of toil. The promotion felt like the sun coming out after a long, cold, and lonely storm. However, this victory carried a slightly cynical edge because it required a trick to achieve. The manager shook his hand and encouraged him to continue working with his usual dedication. He promised that the factory could no longer function without his wisdom and technical skill. The young man stood in his new office, feeling the strange power of being noticed. He had successfully navigated the mentor-student dynamic to reach this newfound height of career success. He learned that reliability is a virtue, but indispensability requires making your presence felt. To work with wisdom means finding the perfect balance between being helpful and being heard. Without realizing your own presence, you risk being replaced by those who shout much louder. His journey from an invisible apprentice to a senior technician was finally complete and validated. The factory hummed once more, now under the watchful eye of its most valued asset. He felt a surge of pride, knowing he had finally mastered the invisible lamp paradox. He had finally found the secret to being valued. Or so you thought. Success can be addictive, and the worker was now completely hooked on this newfound sense of leverage. He had found a superpower, but like every great power, it began to change his entire perspective. The invisible lamp was finally shining, but he was the one controlling the light switch now. Whenever he felt even a slight lack of respect, he reached for his most powerful tactical tool. If his efforts weren't met with immediate praise or benefits, he simply chose to disappear for the day. It was a calculated absence, designed to remind the factory exactly what they were missing without him. He was no longer just a craftsman. He was testing the limits of his own perceived indispensability. Every time he walked away, the gears of the factory ground to a frustrating and costly halt. Managers who once ignored him were now scrambling to meet his demands just to keep production moving. The young man found that the situation turned in his favor after every single day he took. Promotions came faster, benefits increased, and the respect he craved finally seemed to be his for the taking. It felt like a victory for every undervalued worker who had ever been treated like a ghost. But this game of strategic absence was becoming a habit that he could not seem to quit. This cycle of taking days off to gain leverage continued systematically for several long months. Month after month, the pattern repeated as he traded his reliability for a quick moment of power. He believed he was mastering the mentor-student dynamic, outgrowing the old man's simple garden wisdom. He was no longer trying to work with wisdom. He was playing a dangerous game of professional chicken. The thrill of being missed was far more intoxicating than the satisfaction of a job well done. He began to wonder when healthy leverage crosses the thin line into nothing more than blatant manipulation. Can a person truly have too much of a good thing before it starts to turn sour? He was like the boy who cried wolf, testing how many times the village would keep listening. His reliability was slowly eroding, replaced by a reputation for being talented but entirely unpredictable. He ignored the delicate balance required to maintain both his professional value and his personal integrity. The factory was running, but a quiet resentment was beginning to brew among his weary colleagues. He felt untouchable, convinced that his presence was the only thing keeping the entire operation afloat. But he forgot that a trick only works as long as the audience is willing to be fooled. The worker was blinded by his own brilliance, failing to see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The worker believed he was finally untouchable, but his arrogance blinded him to a simple truth. Every time he felt slighted or ignored, he chose to punish the factory with his absence. He began taking a day off whenever he felt he was not receiving enough respect or benefits. In his mind, every missed shift was a reminder of just how much they needed him. He confused being a source of light with being a source of constant and growing friction. While he saw himself as indispensable, his colleagues were starting to see him as a burden. The machinery could be fixed, but the broken trust in the workshop was becoming far harder. A dark misconception began to take root in his heart, twisting his view of professional value. He truly believed that making things hard for others was the same as being highly valuable. But true value is never built on the foundation of someone else's frustration or daily struggle. Think of the lamp metaphor that once guided his journey toward becoming a master craftsman. A lamp is meant to guide the way, not flicker and fail when it is needed. People do not want a lamp they cannot rely on, no matter how bright it shines. Reliability is the quiet backbone of every successful career, yet he was casting it aside. The mentor-student dynamic had shifted, with the student forgetting the most basic lessons of balance. He thought he was working with wisdom, but he was actually playing a very dangerous game. Real indispensability comes from being the solution, not the person who creates the next problem. He missed the crucial difference between being a vital asset and being a difficult person. Every day he stayed home was another day. The factory learned how to survive without him. The very leverage he cherished was slowly turning into the reason for his eventual downfall. Why did he think that being a source of stress would make him more desirable? True masters understand that their strength lies in their consistency, not in their sudden disappearances. He was losing the delicate balance between his unique skills and his basic professional duties. The factory owners were not just looking at his talent. They noticed his growing unreliability. A brilliant worker who cannot be counted on is eventually seen as more trouble than worth. He failed to see that a reliable candle is better than a grand but flickering lighthouse. By focusing only on his power, he ignored the service that gave that power its meaning. The storm clouds he ignored were now moving closer, ready to wash away his false security. Wisdom requires knowing when to shine and when to simply be there for those who depend. He had become the very thing he once despised, a broken lamp in a dark room. The cycle of absence and manipulation had to break eventually under its own heavy weight. One morning, the young man showed up for work, and the iron gates simply did not open. He rattled the cold metal, but the familiar sound of the unlocking mechanism remained silent. For the first time in 10 years, the master craftsman was barred from entering his factory. The security guard looked away, unable to meet the eyes of the man he once respected. What happens when you are no longer the solution, but the very source of the problem? The lamp that flickered too often had finally been replaced by a more reliable, steady light. He realized his absence was no longer a tool for leverage, but a relief to everyone else. Like a bridge missing too many planks, his professional reputation had finally collapsed into the water. A formal notice was delivered, coldly stating that his services were no longer required at the factory. In a single painful moment, the career he built with a decade of sweat was gone. He had traded his hard-earned reliability for a temporary and hollow sense of power. How quickly can the title of irreplaceable transform into the label of unreliable and difficult? The silence of the idle factory behind the gates felt heavier than the loudest machinery ever did. Standing alone on the pavement, the crushing weight of his own arrogance finally began to sink in. He remembered the master's warning, realizing too late that wisdom is more than just technical skill. Being barred from entry was the final proof that no one is truly above the system. His position was filled by those who showed up, proving that presence is a fundamental virtue. He was a master of the machine, but a complete novice in the art of human connection. The fall from indispensable to unemployed happened much faster than he ever thought possible. He walked away from the gates, a master craftsman with nowhere left to practice his trade. He had played his last card, and the house had finally folded on his misplaced ambition. He thought he was proving his worth, but his mentor saw only his growing unreliability. Returning to the old craftsman's quiet garden, the worker expected a sympathetic ear for his struggles. Instead of comfort, he found the master staring at a small, flickering lamp on the wooden table. The young man began to complain about how the factory failed to appreciate his strategic absence. He spoke of his power, his leverage, and the chaos that erupted whenever he stayed home. The mentor remained silent, watching the flames struggle against a slight breeze in the evening air. Finally, the old man looked up, his eyes reflecting the soft, uncertain glow of the wick. He asked a simple question that cut through the worker's pride like a sharp blade. Would you ever choose to keep a flashlight that only worked when it felt like shining? Is being skilled really enough for a team if you aren't there when it truly counts? A light bulb that constantly flickers is often more frustrating than a room left in total darkness. When a lamp is constantly going out, it ceases to be a tool and becomes a burden. The mentor explained that people simply do not want to rely on a lamp they cannot trust. Reliability is the silent foundation upon which every successful career and lasting relationship is built. Without it, your talent is just a series of broken promises and missed opportunities. The craftsman told the young man that a lamp that keeps going out will eventually be replaced. No matter how beautiful the glass, a broken light will always be swapped for a better one. This is the harsh reality for those who mistake their absence for a measure of true value. You must learn to work with wisdom, balancing your unique skills with a steady, dependable presence. True indispensability is not about being missed. It is about being the one everyone can count on. The worker looked at his hands, finally seeing the flaw in his arrogant, manipulative strategy. He had focused so much on proving his importance that he forgot to be actually useful. His mentor's words were a heavy weight, forcing him to confront the damage he had caused. This was the moment the apprentice realized that trust is much harder to build than leverage. The invisible lamp paradox had taken a dark turn, revealing the price of his own hubris. Balance is the key to a lasting legacy, yet he had tipped the scales too far. He stood there in the fading light, absorbing the painful truth of his master's quiet warning. The second half of the lesson was much harder to swallow than the first had been. We often take the most important things for granted, not because they lack value, but because they remain constant. The truth is, we mimic this behavior in our own relationships and careers every single day. Consider the air we breathe, which we only notice the moment it starts to thin or disappear. You would never want to struggle for oxygen every day just to remember its vital importance. The same principle applies to the people who are always there, supporting us through every silent struggle. We often overlook family and friends simply because their presence is a reliable constant in our lives. Is it better to be the bright firework that fades or the steady flame that never wavers? Are you striving to be seen as important, or are you striving to be truly dependable? The young man thought his absence made him valuable, but it only proved he was no longer reliable. True wisdom lies in understanding that reliability is the foundation upon which all lasting trust is built. The elderly craftsman knew that a flickering lamp is eventually replaced, no matter how bright it once shone. He advised that success requires maintaining a delicate balance in every single aspect of our complex lives. This balance prevents us from becoming the burden we once sought to alleviate for those we love. How can we show our unique value without breaking the sacred trust of those who rely on us? Work with wisdom by realizing that your presence is a gift, not a tool for cold manipulation. Do not let the desire for recognition turn your steady light into a source of constant anxiety. Real indispensability comes from being the person others count on when the world becomes dark and uncertain. Gratitude should be the fuel that keeps our inner lamp burning brightly for ourselves and for others. Remember that the most precious things are often the ones that do not demand attention through chaos. Success is not about the tricks you play. It is about the quiet, steady balance you keep. Let your life be a lamp that shines consistently, illuminating the path for everyone who follows you. In the end, being reliable is far more valuable than simply proving how important you think you are. Have you ever felt like that flickering lamp, working hard but completely unnoticed by those around you? The story of the factory worker teaches us that being indispensable requires more than just silent effort. True success in your career requires working with wisdom in addition to your daily hard work. You might think your results speak for themselves, but silence often leads to being overlooked or forgotten. If a person cannot make others realize their presence and contribution, they risk being replaced eventually. To avoid the apprentice's mistakes, you must learn to shine your light without blinding your team. Start by communicating your value through regular, concise reporting that highlights your most impactful achievements. This subtle presence building ensures that your hard work is seen and appreciated by the right people. Instead of total withdrawal, try strategically stepping back only to demonstrate the systems you have built. The elderly craftsman wisely advised maintaining a perfect balance in every single aspect of your life. Think of the lamp metaphor as a tool for visibility rather than a weapon for manipulation. A steady flame provides constant warmth, while a flickering one creates nothing but anxiety and doubt. Real indispensability comes from being the person who solves problems before they even become visible. Reliability is the foundation of your professional reputation, but visibility is the frame that supports it. You should aim to be the steady flame that everyone relies on during the darkest hours. Do not let your dedication become a blindfold that keeps you from seeing how others perceive you. Master the art of the subtle update to keep your manager informed of your quiet victories. When you work with wisdom, you ensure that your contributions are woven into the company's success. Finding this balance is the ultimate secret to a long, fulfilling, and highly respected career path. It is time to step out of the shadows and let your steady light finally be seen. Remember that the most valuable tools are the ones we know we can always count on. Use your newfound knowledge to build bridges of value rather than walls of intentional absence. In the end, your legacy is built on the consistency and wisdom you bring to your work. So, are you going to be the lamp that stays lit, or the one people are forced to replace? The path to lasting success is narrow, but clear, requiring far more than just sheer effort alone. We must always remember the lesson of the steady flame, which provides value without causing constant alarm. True reliability is like a silent engine, powering progress without demanding attention through every single breakdown. To work with wisdom means understanding that your presence should be felt, even when you are gone. Balancing your indispensability with a quiet, steady reliability creates a foundation that no storm can ever shake. Think of a master musician who knows exactly when to play and when to let silence speak. In your career, seek to be the expert who solves problems before they even become visible. Apply this same wisdom to your personal life by being a constant source of light for others. What is one way you can make your value known today, without simply disappearing from view? Remember how the mentor taught his student that true worth is found in more than just absence. Do not fall into the trap of manufacturing crises just to prove how necessary you are. Lasting success is not a sprint of flickering moments, but a marathon of consistent, reliable warmth. People trust the sunrise because it is certain, not because it surprises them with its sudden arrival. Challenge yourself to be the steady light that guides the way, rather than the spark that fades. Whose presence in your life have you been taking for granted lately because of their quiet consistency? Appreciate the steady flames in your own life, while striving to become one for those around you. Impact is often measured by the void left behind, but legacy is built by the light provided. Shift your focus from being merely noticed to being genuinely valued for your unwavering, expert contributions. When you master this balance, you stop fighting for recognition and start commanding a natural respect. Take these lessons from the factory floor and the quiet garden into every room you enter. Make the conscious choice today to not just work hard, but to always work with wisdom.